So pretty much today we want to talk about a recap of labels. I know last week when I talked about labels, I talked about pretty much the negative labels people have put on us while growing up, and we had to pretty much take those labels and remove those labels off ourselves. And I know right now you're probably wondering, who is this next to me?
What's up, guys? My name is Taylor, and I'm here today. I saw Philippe's video on labels, and so I hit him up. I'm like, yo, Philippe, that was a great message. It really resonated with me. And so we're here today to talk more about labels.
Yeah. So pretty much, I know you was telling me about how all labels are not bad labels.
Mm-hmm. Right. So when I heard your message last week, one thing that stood out to me was sometimes society will put labels on you, and some of those labels you have to you do have to rip up and you have to get rid of them. And then I started to think about some of the labels that maybe I've picked up from society. You know, sometimes you have labels that you get to keep, that you choose if you want to keep them, and you choose if you want to get rid of them. So I really just started thinking to myself, and I'm like, well, one of the labels that I used to get a lot was that I'm picky. And obviously, when you hear the word picky, you think that's a negative thing. And something God really just started to talk to me about was some labels are going to have negative connotations and some labels are going to have positive connotations. So one person might say, okay, you can be picky, but to another person, no, in reality, that could just be, I'm a very selective person, and that's not always a bad thing. So we have to kind of pick and choose what labels we're going to pick up, which ones we're going to rip up, which ones we're going to get rid of. And for other labels, we might have to figure out what's the positive, because God creates us in a certain way for a certain reason. And not every label that you get, or not everything that the world tries to make as a negative is actually negative. You just have to sometimes just pick up those labels, throw on that positive, and be confident in who God calls you to be. So
yeah, I know for me, pretty much one of the labels that may not be as bad that we can always switch is that being hard-headed. And a lot of us can probably relate on that, but being hard-headed can simply mean that you're focused, you're determined, and you just don't want to be focused and determined on the wrong things. As long as you can switch it to something positive, such as a dream aspiration, that would be good. But on a spiritual level, what would you say on that aspect?
I would say that there are certain qualities that God gives to us, and He cultivates those. He cultivates those qualities. So one person could say, okay, a person being hard-headed is again, it's a negative thing. But on the positive side, when I think of someone being hard-headed, I think of them being free-spirited. I think of them being focused. I think of them being going against the grain. And even some people might say going against the grain is a bad thing. That's not true. That is not always true. Like sometimes you have to go against the grain in order to stand up for certain injustices, certain levels of oppression, certain systematic things that happen in the world that God wants us to tear down. And so as long as I've known Philippe, I've known him to be just more so of a free spirited. And so to one person, you could say, okay, hard-headed is negative. But on the other standpoint, I see someone who's very entrepreneurial, someone who doesn't really fit into certain systems. They're not going to fit into a box. And when you try to box them in, guess what's going to happen? They're going to get hard-headed. And that's okay. So I would say from a spiritual standpoint, embrace whatever it is that God has called you to be, and ask yourself, okay, am I picking up something negative that society has given to me? Or am I am I allowing God to cultivate certain qualities in me so that way I can walk in my purpose, I can walk in my calling, and I can have a positive impact and a positive effect in the world?
Yeah, so what activity would you say, or what can we do towards switching our mind from the negative to the positive?
Okay, well, that's a great question because I'm very practical. I love, little activities and stuff. So when I saw Philippe's activity, I also thought of a similar writing activity. So one thing you can do is think about all the labels that society has given you. Think about all the labels that you've picked up from the world. Think about all the labels that might sound negative. And on one side, I want you to write negative connotation. And then on the other side, I want you to write positive connotation. And that just means negative and positive, basically. And after you do that, I want you to write down everything in the negative and think about how it's actually a positive. So, for example, maybe someone said, "Oh, you talk too much. You just don't know when to stop talking." Okay, and you hear that, that sounds like okay, negative, and you might start to think, okay, oh no, I talk too much. But a positive is there's so many different positives with a person who can communicate. You can be very communicative, and so
pretty much another way is just the message here is taking negativity, turning it into fuel, and allowing that to be your motivation to reaching your goals and your dreams.
Yeah.
But pretty much, go ahead and close it out.
Yeah. So you guys have 2 activities now. So the first activity, think about those labels that you need to get rid of, because there's some labels that people have put on you that you sure do. You just have to rip it up and get rid of it, and then do the second activity, write down those negative labels and see how it can be a positive thing.
Sounds good. So there you have it. Phil and Taylor on labels.
Until next time.